Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. My name is Rafi. We're here with Shonatello to talk about Cuddle Therapy, which I really appreciate. Please follow us on our 4 different YouTube channels. Check out our BitChute and join the Roundtable Discord where we do daily events, active voice chats of all kinds with very interesting people. And yeah, so without further ado, Shonatello, we're going to be talking about what is Cuddle Therapy. We ask a professional cuddler, how would you get into professional cuddling? What would someone expect from a session with a pro? What do you think? Who do you think would benefit from professional cuddling? How do you handle a session turning negative? So thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm wonderful.
Awesome. So would you like to start us off just by telling the audience and me what is exactly Cuddle Therapy?
Absolutely. So it is just the practice of touch in a professional setting. So you create a safe space for your client based on their needs. So there's an interview process and you tailor make the needs to the client. So it could be someone who has an aversion to touch due to trauma in their past. It could be someone who's isolated for whatever reason, someone who might have difficulty with relationships for whatever reason. There's some people who are like on the spectrum or might have physical limitations that will cause them to isolate themselves, or if they're isolated by society, those kinds of things.
I see. So what benefit does Cuddle Therapy offer to these types of people?
Well, it definitely deals with that feeling of being alone. So we all want to feel like someone cares for us, and touch actually releases a lot of chemicals in our brains, and it's actually one of the first things that's developed in a fetus when it starts forming, and so it's super important with all of our nerves, and having that skin hunger met. It has a huge effect. There's been studies on orphans who receive touch, and there's been ones who haven't received touch, and they've done comparisons as to how it affects their growth. And obviously, I mean, not obviously to everyone, but there's a clear difference with the children who were touched versus the ones who weren't. There's actually been, I've heard of stories of them dying due to lack of touch. I'm not exactly sure on the specifics for that. I'd have to pull it up for you, but yeah, so it's huge.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it. I think we'll definitely probably get into more of the reasons somebody would seek out Cuddle Therapy and the benefits from it more on as we go throughout the podcast. But I want to ask you, how did you get started as a cuddle therapist?
So I actually was watching YouTube one day and I fell asleep on my couch, and I woke up and there was interview with a cuddlist on my YouTube, and I don't know how I got there, algorithms, I guess, but I was like, what is this? Is this a thing? It was so random and so weird to me. And I watched that video, and then I watched the next one, and I watched the next one, and I was like, wow, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was such a call to my heart. It just made so much sense to me.
Wow.
And so I looked into it to see what it would take to actually be a professional cuddler. And there are no medical licensings or anything that you need at this time, though those of us in the community are trying to push that forward. But that's way far out there. It's kind of like massage therapy was when it first started. No one really took it seriously. It was associated with parlors and things like that. And so yeah, I just looked and found there was a certification program online, and I went through Cuddlist.com. I liked their program because it focused on consent work, which was super important to me. Being able to maintain that safe space for someone to where they didn't have to worry that I would definitely speak up to, if there was any boundaries that were crossed or anything like that, because it's a major concern. And so they could just rest easy knowing that I would hold the space for them.
Sure. Well, I know I asked you a while ago, and you were talking about the different precautions you have in place for your patient and for yourself, and that was very interesting. Would you mind going over that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, I wouldn't mind. So there is a code of conduct that is through Cuddlist.com. So I normally get most of my clients through the website that I'm signed up with and certified with. And there's 10. There's a list of 10 code of conduct. I'll just go through it really quickly. So one, cuddle and practitioner both verify that they're at least of legal age of consent in their location. Number 2, client and practitioner both agree to be free of any mind-altering substances during the session and thereby fully able to give consent. Super important. And
Wow.
number 3, client agrees to fully disclose any diagnosis or conditions that may affect their cuddle session with the practitioner. Number 4, client and practitioner both agree to practice consent and attention to personal boundaries at all times. Number 5, client and practitioner will communicate to find what is mutually comfortable throughout each cuddling session. This applies to all communications prior to and after session as well. 6, this is a strictly platonic service. Both client and practitioner both agree to not pursue or encourage sexual arousal. Also, minimum clothing of tank top and shorts that cover the top half of the thigh. So anything suitable to be worn in public. No hand to genital or breast contact. No initiating genital stimulation of any kind. No exchanging of saliva or any other bodily fluids in any way. Number 7, the client and practitioner both agree to respect personal hygiene. 8, client confidentiality is to be respected at all times. 9, either client or practitioner may end the session at any time. And 10, all feedback is valuable and confidential.
Well,
So
that's
that's pretty extensive.
yeah.
And the clients who come to me and have come through that site and have read through the code of conduct and have a good understanding of that are definitely their motives are clear. They are seeking support, and I want to be a supportive role in their life. And so I take their request from the site and I contact them, let them know my process because every practitioner is different. And I work out of my home. I have a cuddle studio in my home, so I do vet everyone before I give out any information. And so that usually requires a video call of about 15 minutes just to go over what they're seeking from their session, what led them to cuddle care, and give them a little bit of background on me and what they can expect from a session. And so for those calls, I usually go into the logistics of the location, what they can expect in the Cuddle Studio. And I do also have audio video surveillance. And once a waiver is signed stating that no harassment took place on my part or theirs, will get a copy of that waiver if they so desire, and then the audio video recording will be deleted within 24 hours. So yeah, that's pretty much my process and what I go through for that.
Sure. Are there, so you said you're running this business from your own home. Are there any advantages and disadvantages to doing that? Obviously, you were talking about the vetting process and giving people your address, but once they're, there, are there advantages or disadvantages to that? Because that sounds unique in and of itself.
That's a great question. Actually, I have had clients mention that having the cozy, homey feel is very soothing to them. And also they feel that I am being open and sharing with them my space, which is really heartwarming. I absolutely love that idea.
Holy shit, that's profound. That kind of hit me.
Oh.
Well, it's just the moment, and you want it to be as safe as possible. And if these people are like, wow, the person who is doing this cuddle therapy is really letting me into their home and they're trusting me and it's an authentic thing, that just sounds awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for appreciating that. So there were legalities that I did have to go through with working out of my home because I did go through the process of getting the LLC and the insurance and being what I call legit. But there are a lot of cuddle therapists out there who did not take that route because it's not technically necessary yet. But I went and got approval through my village to have a permit to work out of my home for a home occupancy. So I did meet with my local mayor and had to explain to him what cuddle therapy was. And, he just wanted to make sure everything was on the up and up, and I said, absolutely, you have nothing to worry about. this is how I go about it. And he said, okay, I see nothing wrong here, go for it. So that was pretty exciting for me. That was probably one of the best days.
Solid. This sounds like a huge W as far as a business and a lifestyle and what you're doing for other people. I do have a question though. You brought up something earlier about the history and the beginnings of cuddle therapy. I don't know how knowledgeable you are about that specifically, but could you go into some of the history that you do know about cuddle therapy and try to share some light on that?
Absolutely. So like I said, it is a new up and coming industry. And I do know that it started out on the East Coast in New York. It started with Cuddle Party. It was actually just some friends who got together and decided to, I don't know how it came up, but they were just like, hey, let's cuddle. And then it started becoming like a bi-weekly thing that they did. And then it just started to expand and they started inviting more friends. And then one of them had the idea to turn it into a business. And so they started Cuddle Party out east, and it kind of started growing from there. It was just something that people didn't realize they needed until they stumbled upon it.
Wow, that's a very nice story. And I guess then it started in the era of the internet, so wherever it started it just spread out from there to everywhere.
Correct. Yeah. It's definitely the best time for it to be being spread, like you said, with the internet. Absolutely. And then now that we have so much recognition, we're actually getting clients from psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're like, hey, there's this thing, you should try this, I think it might work for your particular case, those kinds of things. And that is just mind-blowing. I'm like, yes.
Awesome. So if I wanted to start being a cuddle therapist, what would I do? Does the process start online, or do I have to, get the mail-in forms? How do I start being a cuddle therapist?
Well, that journey is different for everyone. Like I said, I took a little more of a legal route, but there are people who start on websites like, oh, I forget the name of it, Cuddle Comfort.
Hmm.
And they just open themselves up to cuddling strangers. And like I said, I feel more comfortable when I have a level of training. I wanted to make sure that I could be the best for my clients. I wanted to make sure that I could have as much knowledge as I possibly could about what was needed from me, so that I could maintain that safe space for them. So that's why I did seek out an online certification program. There are a few of them out there, and there are some that just focus on different positions, ways to run your business, how to speak with clients to let them know what's expected, those kinds of things. With Cuddlist, there are a lot of exercises that we can use during our sessions to help the client really hone in on what they need in that moment. So there's one that is my favorite. I like to ask a client some silly random questions, like, and I tell them, okay, you have to say no to everything I'm about to ask you. You say, okay. And or I'll do it the other way. It depends. And so it's like, okay, can I shave your head? And they'll say no. And then I'll say, okay, will you give me your car? No. Will you give me a hug? No. Okay, and then I go back over those questions again. You have to say yes to all of these questions. So you have that silly little feeling. It's like, can I shave your head? And they say, yes. Or, will you give me your car? Yes. And there's usually the voice that goes up, or like the little purse of the lip,
Yeah, and then
and
you're
then it's
there to
the, will you
comfort
give me
them?
a hug? And it's a concrete yes. And that's when I just point out, okay, you feel the difference between when you said no to those questions, and then when you said yes. There were ones that you really didn't want to do, and then there was ones that you were okay with. And that's usually the feeling that I want them to really hone in on, and to focus on. Okay, so if I ask you if you would like to try a certain cuddle position, or are you done, or is it okay if I rub your arm, or those kinds of things. I want you to really focus in on that feeling of the yes, I am all in, I am a yes, or that I'm a maybe. And I advise people, if you're a maybe, be a no. Let's just err on the side of caution, unless you want to try something new and have the freedom to say, I changed my mind. Let's do something else. And that's encouraged as well. Laughter is encouraged, tears are encouraged. It's complete safe space, and everything is confidential. And so yeah, that's kind of the process that I learned through my certification, was really getting into that consent work, and helping people to be in the moment and figure out what it is that they need from me in that moment.
Wow. Do you want to go into more things that happen inside a professional cuddling session, and like what you might do when something, like when negative emotions come up or positive emotions come up? How do you handle different sessions like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Each session is different, and it really does depend on what the client needs. there's, I've had clients who needed words of affirmation. I've had clients who needed just silence. I've had clients who really needed really tight squeezes, and so it depends on what they feel they're lacking, and what I can provide for them. And that's part of the vetting process. Is I try to make sure that I am the right cuddlist for them, and I do let them know, hey, if I'm not, that's okay. Like, I will not hold it against you if there is a different cuddlist out here who has a better set of tools to help you, because that's perfectly fine with me. I have not had any, like, psychology training or anything like that. So I'm like, if you need something, with somebody who has some kind of certification in that area, absolutely, I encourage that. But as for what someone can expect in a session, I did tell you a little bit about my favorite exercise there. And I reference the Book of Cuddle. So there is something called a Cuddle Sutra, but that's something that I think is a little more for a couple type setting. I don't feel like it's the best for a professional setting. So I do stick with the Book of Cuddle, and I have flashcards from that book. It's actually written by a cuddle therapist, and so I just have them flip through it and ask them if anything jumps out at you. You want to try, any type of cuddle position. That's, just pull out the flashcard and we'll go from there. So I find that that's the easiest for someone who's starting off, who's a beginner, to have something to reference. And I give them words like I've been using here, like, oh, next, or I'd like to try something else, or I'm full. that's my favorite. I'm full. Let's do something else. And so just to kind of encourage them to, if they feel like they need to move something along, that there's a way to do it to where they don't feel like they're letting me down in any way, because there's those feelings. It's like, oh, I don't want to say anything, I don't want to let anyone down or upset anyone. No, that's absolutely fine. This is part of the process. Let's try whatever you want to try, that kind of thing. I've had clients who wanted to play board games, and I'm an avid board game player, so we find a way to cuddle while playing a board game or a card game. And yeah, it can look like anything they want it to look like. It's personally tailored to everyone.
Wow. Okay. Earlier, you gave a list of maybe 10 different archetypes or types of people that would benefit from cuddling. Would you like to go over those type of people that you think, and I guess even like the place in the people like in the place of their lives that they need cuddling?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you asked me who could benefit from cuddling, my answer would be everyone. Um, and humans, some animals, but
Dolphins for
um,
sure.
absolutely. So yeah, like I said, it's anyone experiencing any feelings of isolation for whatever reason. I know before the pandemic hit,
Mm.
I was actually really seeking out to work with the elderly in nursing homes. That was actually a huge thing on my heart, and then everything hit, and I was like, oh no.
Oh.
So I've had to put that dream on hold for a little bit, but we'll get there someday. And I did mention I do have a few clients who are on the spectrum. They have mentioned to me that it is difficult for them to have romantic relationships, even cuddles from mom. It can be hard to find sometimes, because there is sometimes a disconnect, and um, so they need somebody to be there for them without needing them to be there for them emotionally. And that's what I can do, and that's what I can provide for them. And that just warms my heart. Like I am so happy that I can be there for other people. Like it just absolutely fills me with joy.
It sounds fantastic. That does beg the question: have you worked with any clinically depressed people who were like very down and out when they came in, and how did those sessions go, if you had any like that?
Yes, I have. Like I said, I have had some counselors and psychologists send their clients to me.
Oh,
And depression, anxiety, social anxiety, that was a big one. So just kind of navigating those feelings. Those are a lot of big hurdles for them to be dealing with and trying to overcome. And my job is to just be there, and provide that safe space for them. If they want to talk about things, that's perfectly fine. If they want to just be in a room with another human being and not feel like their heart is going to pump out of their chest, that's fine too. So yeah, there has been a few cases where I've had clients who are dealing with some really deep things. Absolutely.
and how, like, what is the difference between their attitude at the beginning of the session versus the end?
So the beginning of the session, there's usually a lot of nerves, which is completely understandable. And it usually takes, I recommend for most new clients, I recommend an hour and a half, so 90 minutes. Because the first maybe 45 minutes or so is pretty nerve-wracking. And once they finally realize, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about if I do something or see something wrong, she's going to let me know. Or, it is okay for me to ask what I need, or, those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
once that's established and once that's understood, then they can finally relax. And there's almost like just this like, just this like
Relief.
the
Yes, like
whole
the relief. Sorry.
the
Amura,
whole
yeah, we'll open it up for questions at the end. Nobody open their mics until then, please. Keep going,
the whole
Shonatello.
the whole energy of the room just kind of changes at that point. And
Yeah.
so I do notice at the end of the session, because there is an oxytocin release when you have those nerves on your skin, stimulated. And so you can experience rosy cheeks, or like a little lightheaded feeling, or some people fall asleep. And I've had some clients who said, look, I need to slow my brain down, and Cuddle does that for me. And so they use it as kind of like a meditation, which is fantastic. I've had other clients who say, I come here so the rest of the world disappears for 90 minutes, and then I go back and face life. I'm like, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm glad I can do that for you.
It
But
sounds very, very beneficial. Like, just in every aspect, it sounds so helpful, and I feel joy for you that you're in this career and that you love it so much. But your final talking point was what happens when a session turns negative, and I'm going to assume that you would only put that because you've had sessions turn negative before. So, what happens when a session turns bad?
yeah, so the main question that I get asked a lot is about sexual arousal, and what happens in a session if there's arousal. And I simply tell clients it's not something that is discouraged, but it's certainly not something that is encouraged. And so we change positions, we just wait things out. that kind of thing. Nothing is acted upon. Sorry. And I went over the code of conduct to so make sure that nothing is stimulated, that kind of thing. But it's certainly not something that I will ever make anyone feel bad about, or make them feel uncomfortable about in any way, because it's just natural and normal, and we just wait for it to pass. And if there are boundaries being crossed or lines being crossed, and there's not that understanding from the client of, oh, hey, this is just something that's, oops, it's not part of the session. It's just something that we deal with if it happens in the session. Then I take payment first before the session starts, and I will escort my client out, and I will give them back their payment, and I will just end the session. And so that's usually how I deal with any boundaries being pushed, and that's usually how I address it. I'll remind maybe once or twice. So for me personally, I don't allow kissing of any kind. So some cuddlists are okay with dry kissing. So someone asking, can I kiss you on the back of the hand? Can I kiss your forehead? Those kinds of things. I don't allow that in any of my sessions. That's a personal boundary of mine. And so if a client does end up doing one of those actions that is crossing the line, or a personal boundary, then I will simply remind, that's not something that we do, or I'll say, remember, no kissing, please. Or if a hand wanders somewhere it's not supposed to, I will simply move it. And if it happens again, then I will have to end the session. So that's usually how I deal with that, but I try and be really gentle about it, because I know it can be a new experience for most people. And so yeah, it's something that you definitely have to handle with care.
Wow. Well, that was fantastic, and I'm definitely going to open it up to questions here in a second, if you're all right with that. But I would like to ask one more question that I do have, and this is just a silly one. What happens if a client gets an erection during a session?
Right. So that's something that is discussed during the video call, the vetting process. And because, like I said, that is the most common question I receive. And usually the options that I will give is if it's something that is impeding on my space, I will simply ask to change positions. Or if it's something that they notice and I don't notice, and they're uncomfortable by it and they want to change. Say they're the big spoon and I'm the little spoon, and they notice something happening and they're like, "Oh, can I be the little spoon, please?" Absolutely. And we just flip over, no problem.
Wow,
they never have to tell me why, because that's their personal journey. That's what's going on with them. They don't have to explain anything if they feel that they need a change in the session. And other options I will give, if you're worried about that, that's perfectly fine. I understand. We can place a blanket in between us. We can place a pillow, that kind of thing. So whatever their comfortability level is pretty much how we handle that.
All of this sounds very open and very mature. I'd like to open this up to questions if anyone has any for Shonatello here about cuddle therapy and anything related to that.
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay, Chantal.
Absolutely.
Okay. The first one would be, I'm sure you get this all the time, but where do you draw the line between cuddling and, let's say, other forms of intimate contact?
I would need a little more a little more context for your question.
Okay. Well, okay. There's cuddling, there's massages and touch, and there's things that might be more appropriate in a relationship. So I'm asking where the line would be between those.
Hmm. That's a good question. I think that's really a personal question, though. I think everyone would have a different answer for that. If I really were to think about that, because I know there are some people who are like, look, I can't cuddle outside of a romantic relationship. That's just how I'm wired, and that's perfectly fine. I absolutely understand that. Um, but for me, I've always been, I guess you'd say, a touchy-feely person. My family has always shown love through hugs and handholds, and I get my nephew ask me, can I cuddle with you while watching a movie? Absolutely, sweetheart. And so I don't really see cuddle as I guess as a form of intimacy that can only be in a romantic relationship. Um, but I think the line that I would say, like I said in my sessions, my line is the kissing. So any dry kissing, obviously there's no fluids allowed to be exchanged of any kind, but I think as soon as that line starts getting blurred for me is probably where I would say that would be my personal line. But I know a lot of cuddlists who that's not a line for them. They are perfectly fine with that being in a session with a client, and that's not something that they feel would be um, a boundary push for them.
It. I'm really trying very hard not to be um offensive because I actually do support what you do. I think that everyone needs, some kind of touch and contact, like you say. Um, but it's, I think that some people could view this as, like as you say, some people are okay with evolving it into kissing or, perhaps other things even. And is it? I suppose it could be viewed as like a fancy way of having something which might not be legal, I guess you could say, if I'm being nice.
I understand. And with those types of questions, I encourage you to think back to cuddles with your mom or, your favorite aunt or things like that. And just to put your mindset in more of a platonic touch. As we do age, we find it more difficult to associate touch with that. But just bring it back to that innocent stage. Back when, a hug was just a hug and it was just a connection between two people. It didn't mean anything else. It was just, that's
That's
what I would encourage.
that's very nice. I have a question. I guess, I mean, I've asked a lot of questions, but I'll ask another one. Do you have, like, say, repeat clients who are single, who then get into a relationship and no longer come to cuddle sessions, or people who get out of relationships and then start seeking out cuddle sessions?
Yes. So that is something that has happened a few times. People getting into relationships, and sometimes they'll tell me, sometimes they won't, and that's totally fine. And I did have one repeat client who came back and was like, "Oh, hey, so I haven't seen you for this amount of time, and I had a relationship in this time, and this is what happened, and blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing." Whatever anyone is willing to share with me, I receive, and that's just wonderful. As for people who have gotten out of relationships and have sought cuddle, I have had actually a few widows and a few widowers who could not bring themselves to date any longer, and they still recognized that they had this lonely feeling, this isolated feeling, and so they did seek out cuddle care. A lot of them like the cuddle party environment, and they also I have a few that do the one-on-one sessions as well. Um, but yeah, it's definitely there's been people who have recognized that they've been in relationships just to fulfill the need of having someone around, and that's not always fair to the person that they're keeping around.
For sure. Does anyone else have another question for Shonatello? Kasheka, maybe? You've been here the whole time?
Not really. I'm just thinking about how that whole industry would be very beneficial for a lot of people. Yeah, for sure. And I think that maybe some of the earlier answers or questions would have been answered just by that code of the 10 steps that Shonatello likes or uses. Good for you. You know, I do know that a lot of people need hugs. I personally have given myself self hugs. Is that a practice that you can give people to do it for homework or something like that? Do you give homework to people?
I do not assign homework, but during the pandemic, we did actually try and do virtual sessions. And that was one of the things that we would actually have clients do while we were doing it on a video call. So we were still trying to ward off those feelings of isolation for people, even virtually.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shonatello. Thank you so much. This
Absolutely, it's been a
podcast,
pleasure.
thanks. This podcast has made me very happy. This is just such an upbeat topic. I really like talking about it. I'm really excited to get this one uploaded. I think we'll cut it off here and we can go hop into a voice chat. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the Roundtable YouTube channel and join the Roundtable Discord where we do these events every day. And please hit that bell, check out our BitChute and our 4 other YouTube channels as well. Thank you and goodbye. And the rest of y'all in the live audience, we can now hop up to the Roundtable voice chat. We'll leave the people in video chat alone. We don't want to raid them.